Okay, so we're on the Mishnah, Mem Amud Aleph. It's about, I don't know, 8 lines down, something like that. That's where it says the word Masnisin. Okay, so the Mishnah, Yisoma, an orphan girl. So there's no father to collect the money. If she would be a Mefuta, if she would be seduced by a man, so she herself would be waiving any damages because she agreed to the relationship. So there's certainly no money to be paid in her case. Or you have a woman, or maybe this is sort of a description of what we're talking about. It's really the same thing. If you assume like Rabbi Akiva, certainly, that when it comes to a rapist, the woman and the woman was a Nara who had gotten betrothed and then she was divorced, and then she was raped. In that case, the money would go to her and not to her father. If we assume like Rabbi Akiva in the previous Mishnah, then certainly in the case of Mefuta, if the money is going to go to her anyway, then if she agreed to be seduced, then she essentially waived the right to any kind of a penalty payment, so she shouldn't get the money. So Rabbi Elazar, who was a Talmud of Rabbi Akiva, this is Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua. He was one of the 5 Talmidim that Rabbi Akiva gave smicha to after his 24,000 Talmidim died. So then he started all over again on Lag Bomer. That's why we have a big celebration, Lag Bomer. According to some opinions, that's the Pri Chodesh says that's the reason we celebrate Lag Bomer, because that's when Rabbi Akiva started teaching the 5 new Talmidim. So Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua was one of those, and he followed the opinion of his teacher. So Omer, he says, in that case, if I'm dealing with someone who's an Isar, someone Iskarsha, so Ones Chayev, the rapist is obligated to pay the girl. That's how we paskin. But since the money would go to the girl, in the case of seduction, she basically waived the payment. Pater, so then in such a case, he would be pater. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabba Baba Chana, that Rabba Baba Chana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, who was fond of doing that. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Elazar, Yishitas Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Amma. So he was going according to the opinion of Rabbi Akiva in the previous Mishnah, the Amma Yesh Knas Liatzma, who said that if you have a Nara who became betrothed and then divorced and then she was raped, so the penalty payment goes to herself. So Mimai, number one, she gets a penalty payment, and number two, it goes to herself. So Mimai, how do we know that? Miniktani Yisoma, from the fact that the Mishnah has the case of the Yisoma, of the orphan girl. So Rabbi Elazar Omer, Ha-ones Chayev Mepate Potters. Rabbi Elazar says, not only with respect to Nisasav and Niskarsha, but even with respect to a Nahara who's a Yisoma, she doesn't have a father, that the Mepate, somebody who seduces her, would be part of many payments. So obviously it's part of many payments. Yisoma Pshita, if she's a Yisoma, so the only one to collect the money is herself, and she waived the penalty by virtue of agreeing to be seduced. The Lahakamash Malan, rather, the point of the Mishnah is that it's drawing an equation between the case of Nisasav and Niskarsha on the one hand and Yisoma on the other hand. The Narash Nisasav and Niskarsha, if you have a young lass who became betrothed and then was divorced, and then she was seduced, so Kiyasoma, so we treat her the same way we would treat a Yisoma. That's what the Mishnah is teaching us. My Yisoma, just like with respect to a little orphan girl, La'atzma, the money would go to herself. So too, if you had a lass who was the betrothed and then divorced, so the money would go to herself, and that's the reason why the Mefuta would be pater. Why in the case of the Mefata, he would be pater. So Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rabba Bar Shela, Amar Rabbi Amnuna Saba, Amar Rabbi Yada Barava, Amar Rav, long chain over here between from when we start with Rabbi Zera until we get to Rav. Halacha to Rabbi Elazar. The halacha is in fact like Rabbi Elazar. The halacha is like Rabbi Elazar in our Mishnah, which means the halacha is like the version of Rabbi Akiva that we had in the previous Mishnah. So Kari Rabbi led to Rabbi Elazar, Tuvina de Chakime. Rav called he described Rabbi Elazar as among the happiest of the Chachamim. Tuvina means in this particular case, he was among the best of the Chachamim, that he was considered to be a cream of the crop of the Chachamim. So Rabbi Elazar says something, so Rabbi Elazar's word was like gold, so we follow Rabbi Elazar. Okay. So next Mishnah says, Ezu Boshis, a clothing Bayishim is Bayish. When it comes to Boshis, what's the payment of embarrassment? We said both in the case of Mefata and the case of Ones, payment for the embarrassment of the girl has to be rendered. It's an embarrassment to the family. So what's the amount of Boshis that has to get paid? Well, it depends. If the Mevayesh, the person who did the embarrassing, was a very prominent person, so that's his job. The job of a gadol is to give people mussar, so it's not so as embarrassing if you get screamed at by a gadol, you get screamed at by some vagabond on the street, so that's more embarrassing. And in terms of you also evaluate the stature of the person being embarrassed. If the person who's being embarrassed is like a homeless man, it's not so embarrassing. He lives his entire life in embarrassment. But if the person being embarrassed is like the king of England or something, so then it's more embarrassing for him to be embarrassed. So pigam, what about pigam? How is the pigam, the payment of pigam, of the diminishment of value? How is that rendered? We say that's also a payment that's made for both in the case of onus and in the case of mefate. So we look at the woman, let's say she would be a shipka, she'd be a maidservant who will be sold as a slave. So she's going to be worth more if she's a virgin than if she's not a virgin. So how much was she worth before her body was violated, becoming yapa, and how much is she worth after her body is violated? She's going to be worth less. Can ask, what about the penalty? The penalty payment of the 50 shkolim. So that's Shavah B'Kol. That's the same payment that's paid no matter what. That's a uniform payment. Whenever the Torah stipulates an amount, says like an ox is going to gore an Eved Knaini. So if an ox gores an Eved Knaini, you pay 30 shkolim. Doesn't matter if it's an Eved Knaini who's very valuable, an Eved Knaini who is an idle, good for nothing. Either way, you get 30 shkolim.
Isn't it the concept to be how much should become devaluated, perhaps even more, to compensate for the difference?
That's what it is. No, that's not the knas. That's the pagam. The pagam is to compensate you for the devaluation, but the knas is uniform across the board. So the Gemara says, maybe when the Torah says that you got to pay 50 chamishim kesef, that you pay 50 an amount of 50. We learned from Mefata that it's 50 shkolim. That you got to pay 50 shkolim, so it means that covers everything. Maybe it's a one price, fits all, kind of evaluation that it's a full package deal. It's a package deal. You rape a woman, 50 shkolim, and you're done. It pays for all of the different damages and expenses. It covers the knas, and it covers the pagam, and it covers the boshis, and it covers the tsar, and it covers everything. So why don't we just say that? So I'm Rabbi Zera, no. Yoma b'chol ba'al bas malachim chamishim ba'al bas hayotis chamishim. To tell me somebody who violates a woman who is a princess that pays the same amount as somebody who violates a commoner. There has to be some sort of a difference. That there's there's more damage which is inflicted when you're violating a princess. So Amalei Abaye. So Abaye says, why is this like such a shocking statement to say? When we have the ox that gores the Eved Knaini, this one payment that fits all of 30 shkolim, and it doesn't matter whether it's a very valuable Eved or whether it's a good for nothing Eved. Yochi Gabi Eved Nami Yomu Eved Noke Magoli or Shloshim. If I have an Eved who is learned in the skill of stringing pearls together, he's like a diamond dealer Eved that can be utilized to make beautiful diamonds. You only have to pay 30 shkolim if the ox scores him. If your ox scores him, so Eved Ose Maise Machat Shloshim, and you'll say that the Eved who's only able to be on an assembly line, that he is sewing threads with a needle on a long assembly line of people who could do, don't have so much talent. So you get the same 30 shkolim, so you can ask the same kasha. Elam Rabbi Zera says, you want to ask the kasha, explain why it is that there would be a different evaluation for one woman as opposed to another woman. You have to explain it as follows, not in terms of the skill set, but ilu ba'oleh shnayim echa kedarka ve'echa shlo kedarka yom ba'al shlema chamishim ba'al piguma chamishim. But there's a difference in terms of even the bodily integrity, because let's say that a man had relations, that he raped the girl, but he did it shlo kedarka. He didn't come in through the front, but he came through the back, so he didn't break her virginity. But nonetheless, as she has been violated on some level, she's not as pure and pristine as she was beforehand. So the person who then afterwards, it's really the wrong order. Let the Mefarshim, the Rishonim point out, it's the wrong order. Really, it's the first one who had relations with her shelo kedarka. So therefore, there's still going to be a payment because she still has her pesulim. So the one who's then afterwards is ba'al kedarka. So he hasn't violated a girl who is as pristine as a girl who never had relations altogether. So of course there should be a different payment. So Amalei Abaye Hachi. So Abaye said no, but according to that argument, you can make the same argument with respect to an Eved. Yochi Gabi Eved Nami Yomu Eved Bari Shloshim Eved Mukashkin Shloshim. Sometimes you have an Eved who's stronger and hardier and healthier than another Eved, but it doesn't matter. Shor shenogach, if you have an ox that gores the Eved Kanaini, so then the owner of the ox pays 30 shkalim either way, whether the Eved was very strong and hardy, whether the Eved was very sick and weakly. Ella Amar, even if he was a mukashkin with a terrible bodily disease. Ella Amar Abaye Amakra, rather, Abaye says that we derive it from the pasuk. It's not, you can't really derive from a savara that the penalty payment doesn't cover the other damages. We derive it from a Xeris HaKasuv. What does the Torah says? It says that you pay the 50 kesef, right? Minasan la'avi hanara chamishim kesef below lisha tachas hashirina. The 50 kesef are based on the affliction that was wrought upon the woman. So the affliction is one of the different aspects of the damage that is caused, but it's not all of the aspects. That's what it says. Tachas asher ina, honey tachas asher ina, mechlad ika boshes upigam. That the 50 shkalim you're paying because of the fact that you created this trauma, that the woman was traumatized, the family was traumatized. So therefore, that doesn't cover the other payments of the fact that she was devalued or the fact that she was embarrassed. So ina is a very specific reference to the affliction that was wrought upon the body, and therefore it does not cover the other expenses. So Rava Amar, Rava says I could derive it from a different Xeris HaKasuv. Amakra v'nasan la'isha shochei b'ima la'bi anara chamishim kesef. That the man pays the father of the nara. This is in the case of the onus, the rapist that pays the father of the nara for the fact that he was shochei b'ima, for the fact that he lied together with the woman, that he had bia, that he had intercourse with a woman, which means the 50 kesef is only a payment for the hana of the intercourse, hana shkiva nun, the fact that he got pleasure, illicit, illegitimate pleasure, for having relations with this woman with whom he was not married. So for that, he has to pay 50 shkalim. But as far as the embarrassment that was caused by the act, as far as the devaluation of what she's worth, so that's not covered by the 50 kesef. The 50 kesef just is a payment for the intercourse itself. So now the Gemara asks, well, but maybe the other payments. We understand the knas itself, the payment of the 50 shkalim. It says v'nasan la'avi anara chamishim kesef, that the father of the last is the one who gets the 50 shkalim. But when it comes to the other payments of the tsar, the boshis, and the pigam, so maybe those payments should be paid directly to the girl instead of going to the father. After all, the Torah only says that the payment of the 50 kesef is what goes to the father. Maybe the other payment should go directly to the girl and not to the father. So he says no, because the Torah says elsewhere in connection with Hafaras Nedarim, binureh beisavia. The father has authority over his daughter because she's beisavia. So therefore, just like he has the ability to nullify vows, he should collect all the payments. Kol shevach nureh le'avia. All of the shevach, all of the benefits that go to a nara should accrue to her father. So if that's the case, then why do I need a separate pasuk to teach me that the earnings of a daughter who is a nara, who is not yet a bogeris, she's not yet 12 and a half years old, she's only 12 years old. How do we know that the earnings that she makes in her livelihood go to the father? Shneimar, v'chiyim kor ishes bitole amah. That it says with reference to the authority of the father that he can sell his daughter to be a maidservant, to be so so just like a maidservant, her handiwork goes to her master. So to the daughter, when she earns any money, so her earnings go to her father. So why do I need this pasuk? Lamali I can derive everything from binureh beisavia kol shevach nureh leavia, that everything, every benefit that a young girl makes should go to the father. Rather, what we see that we don't derive from binureh beisavia, because binureh beisavia is only in the context of Hafaras Nedarim, that the father has the right to nullify any vows to cancel any vows of his daughter. So you'll say, okay, big deal. It's written in Hafaras Nedarim, but at least the pasuk binureh beisavia teaches me the father has authority when it comes to Hafaras Nedarim. Let's extrapolate from there with respect to his right to her earnings or to payments that are rendered to her. So we say, no, mamona me'isura lo yapinan. Hafaras Nedarim is in the realm of ritual prohibition. What you're allowed to do, not allowed to do, it has nothing to do with monetary rights. We don't derive from the realm of Issa Veheta to the realm of Mominus. Why don't we derive from the fact that the father is entitled to the 50 shkalim for the fact for her being raped? So say just like he's entitled to the rapist payment of the Hana Shchiba, of the fact that she was violated, so therefore he should also be entitled to other monetary payments because it's all monetary payments. We say no. One is a monetary payment of direct damage, mamona. That's when it comes to, for example, the pigam or the boshes. So that's mamona. The kanasa, but the penalty payment is a penalty payment. We can't derive regular monetary payments for, what might be called out-of-pocket expenses for actual loss. We don't derive that from penalty payments. Mamona kanasa lo yapino. And mistaba. So what then is the explanation as to why it is that the shevach pay that the boshes payment and the pigam payment go to the father? How do I know that it goes to the father? No, it makes sense that it should go to the father for the following reason, because the father has the authority. He can hand off as pitina sati lishazet, that the father has the authority to marry off his daughter. He can marry her off to a man who otherwise has a lot of trouble finding a shidduch because he's a disgusting person, or he's a mukashchin, or he has a bodily disease where the skin and the limbs, fall off from his body when he walks along the street. So most girls are not going to, no girls are going to want to marry such a guy. However, the father can get a lot of money from somebody who otherwise would not be able to get a shidduch because he's so disgusting and he's so foul and loathsome, so nobody will marry him. But he figures I can pay off, a father that he'll give me his daughter with the right sum of money. So now that the woman has been violated, she's worth less money. So therefore, that's why the father is really the one who loses out, that he can no longer give over his daughter to a manubal or mukashkin and get like a windfall for it. Say, if you give me $1 million, I'll give you my daughter. You'll make a lot of money. Now, even the manubal and mukashkin will say, what are you talking about? She's violated and I'll only give you 500,000. So the father loses out, therefore the father gets the money. Okay, makes eminent sense. Pigam, if it's a pigam, how much money is paid for the pigam? So we say that we look at what her value has been diminished if she would be sold as a shifka, as a maidservant in the marketplace. How do you make such an evaluation? So how much would a person be willing to pay? He wants to buy a maidservant. So it's going to be more worthwhile. It's going to be more valuable to buy a maidservant who's a virgin than a maidservant who is not a maid, who is not a virgin. The shamsho, in order to serve him, because why do you have a maidservant? A maidservant is going to wash the dishes. She's going to clean the windows. So this is a question. So the shamsho, so shipka beula, the shamsho mainafkale mina. So what difference does it make if she's a shipka beula? She happens not to be a virgin. She'll still be able to wash the dishes just as well. She'll still be able to wash the windows just as well. What difference does her virginity make? Rather, it means that it makes a difference because if you have an Eved Kanaini, but you have even that you want to marry her off to, you want to marry the maidservant off to your Eved who has virginity, because then she's going to be worth more to your Eved. What do you care? It's not yourself. You're not marrying her. You're just giving her to your Eved. So what do you care that whether she's a basula or not? What do you have to accommodate your Eved? Your Eved is also just a slave. What difference does it make whether your servant is going to get a beula for a wife or a basula for a wife? What do you care? Why would the master want to pay more because she's a basula? Let the Eved have whatever the Eved's going to have. So we say no. But Eved sheish lo rabba koas mu'achemen. We're talking about a really good Eved. We're talking about an Eved who is like, the head top Eved in the house. He keeps everything running. So you want to show your appreciation for such an Eved. For such an Eved, you want to get the best possible shifka. You'll shell out some extra money in order to get a shifka basula. Now that the woman is no longer a basula, she's going to be worth less for your Eved. Okay.
Why don't we use shula as the guide? There's a different value of shula between shula and the bula. So why don't we use that as the diminishing value? That makes a lot more sense, and maybe the Eved value is minuscule by the shifcha. at the end of the day, even, we already have a definitive amount where it's actually set, what the diminished value is.
It's a
Why-
good,
Why isn't that?
it's a good question, except you're not going to, you're not paying that amount per se. That's just the amount that you're pledging. We don't know if you're going to ever end up actually paying for the
There you go.
ksuba. That's just
True,
the,
but
right.
but the point is that there's a
Here we're talking
guideline.
about, and this is a better guide because this is how much you can actually receive. The father's not going to receive any of this amount for the ksuba. He doesn't receive the amount in the ksuba.
Right, but we're saying what should be, but there's a devalued amount.
Yeah, but
We're
that's,
seeing definitive devalued amount.
yeah, but we want to figure out what's the loss for the father. That's what we want to figure out. That's going to be the loss of the father. It's a good question. Okay, Anaya Mishnah. Okay, that's based on their age. Okay, then they'll have the same value whether they're basula or bula. They'll have the same value. Kol makom sheish mecher ein knas, kol makom sheish knas ein mecher. So whenever the Mishnah starts off with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, that whenever the father has the ability to sell the daughter, namely when she's a katana, so then there's no knas that's received if somebody rapes her. Kol makom sheish knas, and whenever he would receive knas ein mecher, that's when she's a nara, when he's no longer allowed to sell her as a shivcha. Katana, therefore, katana yesh la mecher ve'en la knas, a katana that the father has the ability to sell to be a shivcha. So he gets the ability to sell her and to receive money, but as a result, if she would be raped, he would not receive any penalty payment. Nara yesh knas, a nara does receive the penalty payment, but in la mecha, therefore the father doesn't have the right to sell her. If he doesn't have the right to sell his daughter after she becomes 12. When she's a bogeres, she's 12 and a half years old, and the father can no longer sell her. I should have told a yelet, I can't sell her, but I couldn't sell her when she was a nara either. Below kanas, and also doesn't receive kanas, doesn't receive a penalty payment for her being raped. So the Gemara says this is all Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, but Chachamim say that even when a girl's a ketana, the father can sell her, and he also gets a kanas if she be raped. And she's at least 3 years old. She's a bas bia, but basulim are not going to return. So then the father gets a knas starting from the age of 3. That's how we pass. The Tanya, the Brisa says, that from the time that she is 1 day old until she has the 2 hairs and she's 12 years old. So then the father can sell her, but there's no penalty for knas, for her being raped. From the time she's 12 until she's 12 and a half, then if somebody raped her, the father would receive a penalty payment, but he can't sell her anymore. It's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir Omer. It's Rabbi Meir would say like our Mishnah. Chachamim, however, beg to differ. They say katana the katana, once she reaches the age that her basulim, if she would have intercourse, will not come back. Namely, when she's 3 years old, until she's 12 and a half years old. So it doesn't matter whether the father can sell her or not. He can no longer sell her once she turns 12, but he receives knas payment if she gets raped during that period of time. Yesh knas. Knas in mechalo. You mean that he can't sell her when she reaches the age of 3? He can only receive a knas? No. According to the Chachamim, that both things are applicable. Ema av knas b'makom mecher. Even during the period from that he can sell her, once she's 3 years old, he can receive a knas as well. So Amar Chista, my time in the Rabbi Meir. What's the reasoning of Rabbi Meir that he says, well, if you have one, you can't have the other? So Amar Kra, because the Torah says, that when it refers to the knas, it says that the rapist is obligated to marry the woman if she's willing to. Yeah, if she makes herself available to him, then he's obligated to marry her. So what kind of a woman can make herself available that she can marry off herself? So that would have to be a gedola. A katana doesn't have that ability. So it's only once she becomes a nara, the knas becomes applicable. Rabbanan, the father can veto a marriage, but she can still, as long as he doesn't veto it, she can marry off herself. Rabbanan Amar Reish Lakish, and what's the svara behind the Chachamim? The svara behind the Chachamim is articulated by Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish explains Amar Kra, because what does the Torah say? The Torah says na'ara, but it uses the wording and then nun ayin resh. It doesn't have a hey at the end. It doesn't have a hey at the end. But in the Torah, it just has the 3 words na'ar. So na'ar sounds like that she's very, very young, like a tiny little boy. Na'ara yisiv gam sakanti. So it's only, so therefore, when the hey is missing, it comes to connote even when she's that the reason the hay is missing is because it connotes even if she's a very little girl, like a little boy, she sees like even if she's a very little girl, even if she's a katana, so then the knas would still be payable. Okay. So afilu katana b'mashma. Shama Papa, so Papa heard this. Shama Papa Breda of Kanami Beit Kalochis. The son of Avchanan from Beit Klochis. Beit Klochis is a makom, it's a geographical region. So Azalama Kamed Rashimi Barashi. He said this in front of Rashimi Barashi. This is a great drasha that it teaches us a nar without a hay. So that has the connotation even of a katana. That's how we know that even for a katana that there is knas that is payable. So Amalei. So Shimi Barashi said Atun Hamas needs to law. So you learn this. With respect to this whole sugya of onus, of rape. I don't know how much in law, but I learned this special derivation that when you're missing the hay in the word nara, so it teaches me something. I learned that with respect to the case of Motzi Shema. So that's where I learned that Reish Lakish made a statement. Amar Reish Lakish, the Reish Lakish said, Hamotzi Shema la katana, a man marries a little girl who was given to marriage by her father. So therefore it's considered to be a marriage on a deraisa level. And now he's Motzi Shema. He says, that she's not a virgin. He gets all upset. This is a raw deal. And then it turns out that he was Motzi Shema, that he made the whole thing up. So he has to be put to death, right? So Motzi Shema, the katana, he has to pay, he doesn't get put to death. He pays Mea Kesef. He pays Mea Kesef for being Motzi Shema, la katana, because he wanted to put her to death. So Motzi Shema, la katana, pater. So he's going to be pater because a katana wouldn't be put to death anyway. She's not a bas onshin. So he's pater. Shneimar v'nasnu la'avia na'ara, because the Torah, the pasuk says that you pay the father with respect to Motzi Shema. It says that you pay the father of the nara, and the word nara is written chaser. It's written without the hay. V'nasnu la'avia na'ara. I'm sorry. In this case, it's not written nara. It's not written chaser. It's written mole. So mole means that we're talking about a full-fledged nara. That the whole parasha Motzi Shema doesn't apply to a katana, it only applies to a girl who's at least 12 years old. Yeah, that he would have been putting her to death if it would have been true that she had cheated on her husband, but a katana wouldn't have been put to death. So it says, "V'nasno lavia na'ara, na'ara mole dibira kasef." Na'ara is written with a hay. So we learn from here that if na'ara is written without a hay, that it would apply even to a katana. So masked babada baraba, time of the kasef achmana na'ara. So babada baraba asks, wait a second, you're telling me that I needed for the pasuk to be written male, for the word nara to be written male, halav hachi yavamina afilu katana. I would have thought that the parsha Motzi Shema would apply to katana. It's obvious that it doesn't apply to katana. It says that if it is really true that she wasn't a virgin, that she had cheated on her husband from the time of Erisin, so then she gets the death penalty. Katana labas onshini. And as we mentioned, the katana is not a bas onshin. We know anyway that the whole parasha Motzi Shema wouldn't apply to a katana because she couldn't be put to death because she's not a bas onshin. Elakan nara, rather, the derivation is like this: that here we know because of the fact that Motzi Shema for sure cannot apply to a katana. So we know anyway that she's a nara, and the word nara in this case happens to be written mole. So since I know that we're dealing with a full-fledged 12-year-old in the case of Motzi Shema, and it's written mole, so we can derive from there that when it's not written mole, it's talking even about a katana. And that would be the derivation that Reish Lakish is making in the case of Motzi Shema. We'll stop here. Okay.
Yeah.